Hey guys, I've been a challenger player for the last 4 sets, and with a new patch will always come a new flex guide. So in the 13.4 patch, you still want to play around hero augments like you did in the last patch. If you get a hero augment at stage 2-1, you want to flex, and if the hero augment is going to be coming at 3-2 or 4-2, you still want to prep your 3-1 and 4-1 board for that incoming stage. However, the difference in this patch is that it's no longer a heavily favored AD meta. SAMIRA is still good just because of the augments that SAMIRA has access to, but it's going to be a lot harder to get to SAMIRA. In this patch, SORAKA, VIEGO, and TALIYAH are all pretty strong, equal strength to the AD tree, so it's a much more balanced meta than the last one. However, there are still going to be a few niche comps that are still really strong in the right spot. For example, Gadgeteen +1, you want to play into 5 gadgets with mech. Spread Shot Vayne, you just reroll Vayne. Mana on Ally Death Admin is still really strong with SORAKA and LeBlanc. Cleansing Safeguard is still really good, but not as strong as last patch, and Channel Fervency is still a play into a reroll YUUMI game. And finally, the 3 comps that you want to play from behind are still going to be Kaisa, Duelists, and Brawlers. With that being said, let's get right into the guide. So the first comp I'll be covering is going to be Gadgeteens. In the current meta, there are 2 different ways to play Gadgeteens. The first way is going to be the reroll variant, and the second way is going to be where you play tempo, and this is only if you get the Gadgeteen +1. So in the reroll variant, you only want to play this variant if you get the Lulu hero augment that gives her a lot of HP and AP every time she ults, or the one that gives Poppy 200 armor. If you do get this one, you want to slow roll at level 5 until you hit 3-star Poppy or Lulu. If you get a lot of Wukongs along the way, you can go for Wukong as well. But once you 3-star your Poppy and Lulu, you itemize the unit that you have the hero augment for, and then you push levels, and your win con will be playing 5 Gadgeteens with Nunu. The other variant is if you play tempo. So in the tempo variant, you actually want to play around 3 mech and Gadgeteen +1 your mech, because your mech will get a lot of benefits from the extra damage reduction that Gadgeteen gives it. At level 7, this is going to be your board, and at level 8, you eventually want to swap out of Wukong for Set instead, and then eventually play around all the legendaries, and this is going to be a very strong comp. So the next AP comp is going to be TALIYAH. She's definitely a lot stronger in this patch compared to the last one, and this is probably the most standard TALIYAH variant that you generally want to play. Items you want to go for are going to be Gunblade, Shojin +1, and you want to cap out with Janna and Syndra will just pull in all of your legendary units like Urgot and Fiddle. So if you get a Star Guardian +1, you actually want to play towards 7 Star Guardian instead, and because you already have so much mana generation from 7 Star Guardians, you actually just want to go triple damage item on TALIYAH. And finally, if you get Spellslinger +1, you want to play a board like this that revolves around 6 Spellslingers, and in this variant, you actually want the Shojin, because TALIYAH lacks mana generation. In this case, she already gets enough damage from the extra AP she gets from Spellslingers. So next up will be SORAKA. SORAKA is a comp that is pretty dependent on whether or not you get an admin +1, heart +1, or a good admin. Some good admins are if you get mana on death or ally on death. Your typical level 7 board is almost always going to look like this, and you flex depending on the extra traits you get. For example, if you get an extra heart spat, you might want to play something different to get 4 heart, or if you get an admin spat, you want to play 4 admin. But generally, your board will look like this, and then to cap out your board, you just throw in all of the legendaries like Syndra, Urgot, Fiddle. So if you get the heart spat, you generally want to play around 6 heart at level 8, and your board will tend to look like this. In this board, you want to prioritize getting the blue buff on Zoe if you get a heart spat, because she will just generate extra AP for your entire team. And the other variant is if you get an admin spat instead. If you do, then your board might look something like this. This board will also look very similar if you get the augment Cleansing Safeguard for Lee Sin. So if you get that augment, you generally just play around a Lee Sin frontline, maybe 2 Lee Sins, and play a full heart backline. And then late game, you just flex in your legendaries. So I'm not going to make a separate section just for Lee Sin. Your board will generally just look like this. So next up is going to be Anima Squad. So Anima Squad, you generally only want to play with an Anima Squad +1. The exception is if you hit a Riven or Vayne early and you get a 3 Anima Squad opener. In that case, you could start farming Fame really early, which will enable you to win a lot of fights mid-game with that extra farmed Fame. If you do, you could play towards a board like this. You have 2 options at level 7. If you're very close to hitting 3-star Riven or Vayne and you have the hero augment for them, you could play towards the Riven 3 or Vayne 3 win con, which is probably a higher cap than going 8. However, if you don't, you could just play for tempo and itemize your Misfortune instead and play around Urgot and Fiddle. So the other case is if you get an Anima Squad +1. In this case, you want to play towards 7 Anima Squad, which spikes your board way harder, and you generally want to Anima Squad your Urgot or your Fiddle, and your board will look something like this. And generally, in this case, you probably want to itemize your Misfortune and your Riven. So next up will be Ox Force Viego. So in this comp, the cool thing is that you don't actually need to go for any frontline items at all, because the trait itself already has a built-in frontline, because they will always survive for 1 extra second after they get dropped to 1 HP. This means that you could just prio offensive items and even play around 2 copies of 2-star Viegos with talent in the middle, buffing both of them with chalices. The idea is that you want to end the fight with your resets before your frontline even comes into play. The other variation to Ox Force is if you get the Ox Force +1. In this case, you could play around a board like this. The prime contenders for having the Ox Force spat is going to be either Misfortune or your Leona. Misfortune is good because she benefits a lot from the Ox Force spat and chalices as well, and having the Ox Force spat on Leona will basically enable her to get her ulti off. So next up is going to be Recon. I feel like I've explained how to play this comp like a million times already, but basically at level 6, you just roll down for this board, and then you econ back up until level 7, and then you roll down again to 2-star the rest of your board. And depending on who you hit more of, for example, if you hit more Kaisas, you want to itemize your Kaisa over your Vayne, and vice versa. You also generally have to pick between itemizing your Rammus or Cho'Gath instead, depending on who you get more of, because you probably are not going to be able to afford to 3-star all 4 of your 3-cost units. Some really good hero augments for this is multi-shot for Kaisa or spread shot for Vayne. And eventually, after you hit level 7, econ back up, and then roll down once more at stage 5 or 6 until you 3-star the rest of your board. So next up is going to be Jax. And Jax has a very similar playstyle to Recon. You basically roll down a 3-2 when you're playing from behind and stabilize with the board like this. And then you econ back up, go 7, and roll down once more and try to hit the Soraka for 2 admin and 2 heart, and 2-star the rest of your board. From that point, you could econ back up, and if you're close to hitting your 3-star Jax or Riven, you could roll down for them. Otherwise, you could just play Temple and push 8, and then throw in another legendary unit. So the final AP comp in the AP tree is going to be reroll YUUMI. You could play this comp if you get the hero augment Channeled Fervency, which is the rel hero augment. And basically, game plan for this is to just slow roll at level 6 for 3-star everything on this board. You want to prio items for Nyla and YUUMI. So for YUUMI, you want Blue Buff Gunblade, and for Nyla, you want Redemption, Bramble +1. So after you hit most of your 3-star units, you can just push levels and play random legendary units. A very good 7th unit you can play is going to be Riven, because it's going to give your Lee Sin and your Rel, Defender, and Brawler. So the first AD comp in the AD tree is going to be Duelists. Duelists have a very similar playstyle to Recon and Jax, because it's a comp you can play from behind and still get a 5th with. Basically, you get 5 lose into stage 3-2, roll down for a board that has 6 duelists in it, and you will win streak all the way until stage 5. And the best item in this comp is going to be Lockets, because the problem with duelists is not the damage, it's the lack of frontline. And this will counteract duelists' main weakness, because duelists need the extra time to scale up. So this comp gets exponentially stronger if you get a duelist +1. So if you get the spat, it's the weaker duelist +1 because you need to go level 8 to play a duelist. If you have the augment duelist +1, it's way stronger because you can hit 8 duelists at level 7, and it gives you a way higher chance of hitting Vayne 3-star, because generally, if you have to use your gold to go level 8, it's way harder to hit your Vayne 3-star. If you hit Vayne 3-star, you can itemize your Vayne. Otherwise, generally, you want to default to your Zed carry instead. So next up is going to be LaserCorps. So LaserCorps is mainly a tempo comp. You generally have to play this and intend to win most of your fights early and mid game, because if you don't, you're just going to get outscaled late game and go bot 4. This is why this comp is unplayable if you don't get the LaserCorps +1, because the LaserCorps +1 allows you to hit very crucial LaserCorps breakpoints throughout early and mid game. For example, the +1 will enable you to play 5 LaserCorps early game, and will allow you to play 7 LaserCorps at level 7 when you roll down if you hit 1 copy of Sedge and 1 copy of Zed. After stage 5, you're basically going to lose every single fight unless you happen to hit 9 LaserCorps as your win con. So when you want to itemize your Zed in LaserCorps, it's slightly different than when you itemize your Zed in Duelists, because the main damage in LaserCorps comes from the trait itself, which means most of your damage is going to come from AP. This means that Spark is really good on Zed, and then the other 2 items is going to be Gunblade plus GA. However, the other 2 items are pretty flex, And then at level 8, you just throw in whatever legendary units you find. Generally, you want to play around Echo for more frontline, and then you can throw in a Fiddle or an Urgot. This is not a win-out comp. You generally only want to play for top 4, so you want to save as much HP as possible early mid-game. So next up is going to be SAMIRA. SAMIRA is still very strong simply due to the augments that SAMIRA has access to, Style and Flare and Daredevil. And the only units that really matter in SAMIRA are just going to be SAMIRA and Aphelios. Every other unit is flex. So I'm not going to go too in detail about how to play this comp. You just play whatever 2-star unit you hit as your frontline and call it a day. So the last comp in the AD tree is going to be BELVETH. And if you get the hero augment Back for Blood, this comp is really strong and actually enables you to play 2 copies of BELVETH. If you don't hit 2 copies of 2-star BELVETHs, you just drop this BELVETH and play a standard or generic 2-star frontline or backline unit. Generally, you want to play around 2-star threats, but again, the only unit in this comp that matters is the 2-star BELVETH, and you just play any 2-star frontline or backline unit that you hit. So this sums up my 13.4 flex guide. If you guys enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you guys subscribe to my YouTube channel or followed me on Twitch, and I will see you guys next time.